Okay. So, hi, Luni, and welcome to the first series of Coffee for Future with a Forest for Future. It's my pleasure to host you tonight. And cheers.
Yep. Cheers. It is 9 a.m, but cheers.
Oh, yeah, for me, it's like so late at night.
Yeah, the planet's quite large.
That's a globalization. So, can you tell a little bit about yourself and your organization and what are you doing that is actually helping advance humanity and prevent all the global catastrophes you're facing as a species?
All right. Well, all my impact is indirect because I run a business accelerator focused on mission-driven for-profit companies. I'm based here in Seattle, but as of a few years ago, I started replicating this with partners around the world. So now we have 11 partners in 12 different cities on 4 continents. We have so far run 12 sessions of our program, graduating 83 companies based in 27 different countries, doing all sorts of good for the world.
Awesome. That's so cool. So are you in all the continents or are you mostly in the Western world? Or could you tell me, are you also working with China and Africa and Brazil or not?
Well, we haven't gotten everywhere yet. So we have a few cities here in the States. So again, it started in Seattle and it ran here and only here for 4 years. But while here, we were pulling in companies and entrepreneurs from all over the world. Work with dozens of them from probably, actually don't know the number, 18, 20 different countries. And then we have partners down in Latin America. So we run Fledge in Lima, Peru.
Oh, okay.
And so that's serving Latin America. We have a partner up in Vancouver running a rather interesting program. It's a business accelerator where all of the entrepreneurs are immigrating into Canada. So in order to be in that program, you have to move your company to Canada.
Okay.
He's worked with entrepreneurs from Latin America, US, and Europe. And then we've run the program out in Barcelona, in Catalonia, and in University of Padua in Italy. Both of those worked with entrepreneurs. Well, actually, in Barcelona, we worked with entrepreneurs from Africa and India. In Padua, we worked with entrepreneurs from across Europe and Africa. And then our latest program was a short form program in Nairobi, Kenya, that worked with 12 African entrepreneurs working on land degradation.
Of course.
We have some new partners getting up to speed. We have the world's first accelerator for co-ops out of Boston. We have partners in New York, Alexandria, Egypt, and Kigali, Rwanda that have yet to run a program, but soon. And then we're talking to others. We don't have any programs on the ground in Asia or in Australia yet, but we're working on it.
But your operations are quite global. It's a mix of people from everywhere. I mean, regardless.
Yeah. So we've gotten applications. Kind of the way this works is anyone who wants from the world can apply. The only rule is you have to run a mission-driven for-profit. We have had applications from about 122 countries.
Very cool.
So we're missing all the little islands, but all the major countries.
Yeah, so I really like this new thing for something for co-ops, because it's more and more that the startup world is shifting from this solely for profit business to this more mission driven and impact kind of, and that of course brings NGOs and brings this different nuances from a solely NGO to a business B Corps and all that in between.
So, yeah, there's a big long landscape of what constitutes mission driven, and part of that is how do you govern your organization? Who owns the company? Right? Is it just the founders? Are we just replicating the model where the founders make all the money and the workers are workers? Do we replicate the model where the founders and some of the workers make money, but the vendors, and often the vendors for us are poor people, right? Smallholder farmers and other poor people. Did they get left out? We're working on a plan to not leave them out either. We found a partner who's an expert in co-ops, and we are in 2 weeks launching the first accelerator for co-ops.
No, congratulations. Congratulations. And tell me, what is, in your personal opinion, what is sustainability for you?
I don't use that term anymore. So I
Why
teach.
not?
I don't know. It just seems out of fashion. So in addition to running the accelerator, I have a side job. It's teaching entrepreneurship at Presidio Graduate School.
Mhm.
I got there because I used to teach entrepreneurship at a school called Bainbridge Graduate Institute, which merged into Presidio. They were the number one and number two schools to teach what they call a sustainable MBA.
Okay.
And so they're about, BGI was 6 months older. They got started in 2002, 2003. Back then, we didn't have the word impact yet. We didn't have sustainable development goals
Yeah.
here defined yet. The term that they use, even social enterprise wasn't a term yet. So the term that they picked to describe what they teach is sustainability. And there's really, in that school, there's really two halves to that. There's the bulk of the students who go off to work at big companies to make them more sustainable, or to make them, and that's making them less bad, right? Using less energy, using less water, recycling, less bad, but still extractive. And then there are the entrepreneurs who are trying to go off and do something that has a positive impact on the world. So one example of that was a student of mine who then came through Fledge. She has a company called Evernew. They have a technology that makes clothing recyclable, and they're starting with cotton. So right now, cotton is the crop that uses the most water, the most pesticides, and the most herbicides of all crops. With Evernew's technology, we can stop growing cotton and just recycle it.
I mean, I totally agree. Yeah.
So that's of course, that's sustainability, but that's like global sustainability. That is answering the question of how do we stop using arable land to grow clothing. And they have an answer, and it'll be in the market hopefully later this year.
That's cool.
And one more example, also a student of mine who also came through Fledge, a company called Zirconia. So we all know steel rusts. There's literally trillions of dollars spent on paint and zinc coatings and other technologies to slow down the rate of rust. But if you just think of things like the electric grid, it is a enormous trillions of dollars worth of towers holding up electric wires. And they will all rust away in the next 40, 50 years. Or Zirconia has a non-toxic spray-on coating that stops steel from rusting forever. Or we spray them once and then we're done. Or we do this for the oil pipelines and they don't leak anymore. We do this for the bridges and they stop falling down. So that also seems a little bit better than using a little bit less water or recycling some plastic.
No, I totally agree. But usually with such like great innovations, the twerk is always in this, like, how much it costs. Like, can it be actually implemented, or is just a really great idea that needs so much more time to?
Yeah, but we've solved those problems. So Zirconia's in the market now, just got in the market, and Evernew will be in the market this year. You'll see that you're not going to pay $4,000 for a pair of pants.
That is awesome. That is really, really awesome. So, I mean, when I think, and I think this is how when you and I started talking, is when I think it's all these great projects and great initiatives that we see across the world rising, and my focus is Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. But when you see all these projects, like, they're so great, but usually what they lack is sustainable funding, or actually funding that does not destroy the founders, or funding that does not take so much time from the founders. What do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely agree. So the way that Fledge usually invests is not the normal way to invest in startups. So our model is that we invest $20,000 in every company that comes through Fledge, right, which is not a whole lot of money, but it's something. We in exchange for our $20,000 and all our help, we get some ownership, some equity in the company. And then they buy it back from us using 4% of future revenues. So unlike this typical venture capital model where you put in some money in a company and you get nothing back until there's an acquisition, which means as an investor, you need an acquisition and your whole reason for being is to get your companies acquired. In our model, our reason for being is to see companies grow and have revenues. Right? More and more revenues until they're happy with their scale, which could be $500,000 in revenues or $1 million in revenues or 10 or 100 million. We don't care. As long as they grow their revenues, we get paid back. They get to do whatever they want with their company.
So we understand you well. Like you invest 20,000 and then for a certain amount of years, you hold the shares, or is it whenever they are ready to buy off the shares, they can actually buy off the shares?
They use the actual terms are a little bit more complicated than this, but more or less, every quarter we look at their revenues. 4% of those revenues come back to us to repurchase our shares. The rest stay with the company to grow the company. We do that until there are no more shares to buy.
Wow, so that's pretty cool. That's really pretty cool. That's really cool. And I think that's something that could, I mean, you know the best, but it could something that could be really used in new emerging markets because.
John, if you missed the news, there was a New York Times article earlier this week or late last week saying startups that push back against venture capital. Something I don't remember the exact title, but something along those lines. And there's this movement of mostly social entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs of color, who just don't want to play the VC game, who aren't invited into the VC game, but don't even want to play it, even if it was offered to them. They don't want to just grow as fast as possible and then leave their company. These are the same kind of entrepreneurs who we saw 10 years ago, who started Stonyfield Farms and Ben & Jerry's, although that was more like 30 years ago, or Honest Tea, who never like looked and said, I want my company to be acquired. When that happened, the verbiage that was used in the view of that was that they were selling out, not that they were being acquired.
Yeah.
Right. So Honest Tea sold out to Coca-Cola, and Stonyfield Farm sold out to Danone, right? And Ben & Jerry's sold out to Unilever, as opposed to that being a positive thing, such as, LinkedIn got acquired by Microsoft. That was a positive day, right? And Whole Foods got acquired by Amazon. A lot of people think that Whole Foods sold out to Amazon, right? Depending on which side of this divide you're sitting on.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it's logic. Yeah.
So we're on the side of too many entrepreneurs sell out just for the money and forget their mission. And the entrepreneurs I work with, they thought some mission was worth quitting their job and devoting their life to solving. They don't want to sell out. They don't want to have a quick exit. They in fact want to build a company for the next 10 or 20 or 50 years.
Yeah, so those are the real change makers. Those are the ones who actually dedicated so passionately to what they're doing. So if you look at now of all those, because for me, I see a lot of division, like clustering within people who are really like hard devoted to what they're doing. And those are those type of entrepreneurs that you're talking about. And those are like supremely techy and really focused on, let's make this new app. Let's just get acquired by someone, and that will be really good.
Yeah, I could go cheeky and say the tagline for Fledge is the Conscious Company Accelerator.
The conscious company say,
yeah, so we don't really work with entrepreneurs who just think an app is going to solve anything.
Yeah.
Or some great new technology is going to be the be-all, end-all of some new software technology.
I mean, for me, what I wanted to say is like that there is this clustering in this like very two specific ways of people, but that maybe like bringing them together, or like not that this very conscious people would need to their mind from, God forbid. But it's more that actually they could utilize on the exponential trend and exponential technologies, and maybe like use the techies more for the advancement of their social impact.
Well, let's look at it this way. All right, so I'm going to stick with my company here. I run a global business accelerator. This is a room in my house. Right, so I'm not even in the co-working space. I'm not at Impact Hub today. I'm able to run a global organization from a house on an island in the edge of the Pacific because of those software people. So, right, the bootstrappers that started MailChimp, which is just be clear, not a VC-backed company, it's a bootstrap company worth billions of dollars. They've created a tool that lets me very inexpensively talk to the world. So has the group at Twitter and Facebook. We do Facebook ads and Google, because people let people around the world find what I do through Google. And Google runs the email system, and all these little snippets of technology that in themselves were just built because people thought that was a good thing to do and a way to get rich, right? In most of those cases. But in turn, we now have these tools that let hundreds of thousands or millions of entrepreneurs run businesses in an efficient manner that wasn't possible before. So the family business is entrepreneurship. In my father's era, when he ran his business, the only way he could really reach out to people was to buy ads in the yellow pages, to buy mailing lists, to send them physical letters in one color, because color printing wasn't even feasible back then. So to send a physical sheet of paper printed in one color in an envelope with a stamp on it, like he had a stamp machine, a postage machine in the office, or to do cold calling, right? And literally, you would have people call, buy phone lists and call them. We don't have to do that anymore. Right? We can reach now entrepreneurs anywhere in the world over email for basically nothing, right? For the $5 a month Google charges for email. And an era before that, if you look back at my grandfather's era, he had a hardware store turned into a sporting goods store, right? He could put ads in the paper, and that's about it, right? His customer base was too spread out to like do flyers. So his was coupons and ads in the paper, and he could serve a neighborhood. My father's business could serve a city, and I can serve the world. And that's what technology has brought us. Flip side of that is most of the apps and whatnot don't do that. Most of the apps and whatnot are just saving us a minute or saving us $1 or just entertaining us. So some of those are useful, and most of those are not.
Yeah, that's true. But when you put it like this generationally, it's like really, you get a perspective of how fast everything is moving and how big the reach has become of a single individual, no?
We're just leveraged a little bit more. My business, in fact, is not any bigger than theirs in terms of money. It's just bigger in terms of reach.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe someday I'll pass them up in terms of size. But my company's only 7 years old, and Dad and my grandfather had way more time to build it up. In fact, grandfather's business was started by his father.
Wow. Yeah, so it really runs in your family to be an entrepreneur. Everyone.
At least as far back as the American borns, yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. And can you, like, because our talks or whatever we are like trying to work on is always like, how do we bring like the talk back on climate change and sustainability, and how do we make sure that the startups, NGOs or co-ops or like even single individual that wants to make an impact can make an impact for some greater good or like climate change?
Yeah, it's we don't get enough press coverage. The whole industry is lacking press coverage. And again, I'm what I didn't describe. The reason I understand tech this way is I spent my first 20 years of my career as a techie, as a software entrepreneur, taking money from VCs at that. When I started my first company in '92, there weren't stories in the, Apple would be in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and I think USA Today existed, right, in Time Magazine and whatnot, right, and the European equivalents. Apple and Intel might be there, but most of the software companies and tech companies didn't get that level of press. There was local press there was industry press for that. Nowadays, tech is such a big industry that it's in the business section in every paper. Hopefully we will see social good make that move in the next 10 or 20 years. But at the moment, it's not. At best, it's in the human interest section. Oh, look, there's this great entrepreneur, and look what they're doing with toilets in Africa. Right?
But how do you see this bridge, like going from where we are now and like where it's like, as you say, like somewhere very far?
Well, here's my theory of change. Right, and I've done a talk. Anyone who wants to find my talks, go to Fledge LLC on YouTube.
You should send me the links and I'll just put them in.
Okay, yeah, click on Luni. That's my name. Those are my talks. So I did a talk on how much money is there in philanthropy. And I showed the difference between how much money there is in philanthropy and how much money there is in for-profit businesses. And it's an amazing difference, right? Way more than you think. And so there isn't enough money in philanthropy, and I include government, foreign aid in philanthropy. There isn't enough money to fix any problem in the world. But there is enough money to put a Coca-Cola in any village in the world. And there is Coca-Cola in pretty much every village in the world. And why? Right. So this is my theory of change. It's possible for Coca-Cola to do that because they make money doing that. So it's profitable for someone to buy Coca-Cola from a bottler, to get it to a distributor, to buy it from them and buy it from them and buy it from them and get it in a duka, in a kiosk in the middle of nowhere in the Rift Valley in Africa or in Afghanistan. And so in order to solve the actual problems of the world, we need these mission-driven entrepreneurs to be able to do the same. So when it makes sense for a solar lantern to be in every single village in the world because it's profitable, they will be. And the way we get it there is by starting them out in the peri-urban sections of the developing world where there's no electric grid, and then expanding that out to the villages that are on the paved roads, and then the villages that are in the unpaved roads, and then the middle of nowhere. And we do that with some investment to start with, and then recycled profits after that. And so we just haven't been doing this cycle enough, and this part of the world called social enterprise or mission-driven for-profits just hasn't grown big enough to do that yet. And when it does, it will be news, right? So when we have multiple companies that are public companies that are solving problems like sanitation, or electricity, or hunger for that matter, or poverty, then it'll be news, and it'll show up in the New York Times and the Financial Times and in the Globe and Mail and the rest of the world press.
Yeah, but do you think it will be enough time for them to grow naturally and in terms of climate change, for example? Is there enough time to just let it grow organically, or do you think?
I'm not trying to let it go organically. I'm trying to find more investors to move more money, as are 1,000 other people. And what's holding back the trillions of dollars that are needed to be invested is we have yet to prove that they can make money. So we're starting to prove they can make money, but we haven't gotten in my model of redeemable equity investing, we haven't had enough redemptions to be able to say, okay, here's how long it takes, here's how much money you make. Unfortunately, the reality is it takes about 10 years to prove out a investment model, right, for early stage companies. I've been doing it for 7. There was some going on before I jumped in here. I'm not the first person to do this, but there wasn't a whole lot going on in the early 2000s and the noughts. There was a little bit more going on now in the 2010s and teens. I got started in here in 2012. And when I go to the industry events, when I go to, you said Latin America, when I went to Flea, I was considered one of the old guys there, and not just old because it's white hair. Like I'd been in the industry at that point for 5 years. It was 2 years ago. And I was considered one of the old guys, not one of the newbies. When I go to SOCAP, I'm considered one of the old guys. I've been to 6 SOCAPs in 6 years. And I'm about to go to Sankalp in Nairobi. And again, I'll be considered one of the experts, right? Even though I've only been doing this for 7 years. So not a whole lot, just from that feeling of being considered old and experienced. And yet I've barely touched the surface here. I can just tell this isn't a 20-year-old industry.
Yeah, something is moving. You can feel that it's actually growing and changing, right?
Yeah, and actually, there's another talk. I don't think it's online, but there's another talk I've been doing lately. Going back to look at the venture capital world. So what I've seen as I've gone out and talked, against the venture capital world, and said they're doing it wrong. What I've noticed is that pretty much everyone in the audience thinks venture capital has been going on in this manner forever. Like when I ask them, like, how long has this been going on? Like, I just get blank stares. Because nobody knows, right? The history is not described. It's written like it's been going on forever, right? So Apple, it was public in 1977, 79, something like that. And that's considered a really old tech company. Well, it turns out that venture capital, the way we're doing it now, was invented just before that. Like they were dabbling in the late 60s. Intel got a venture capital investment from the very first venture capital fund in 1968. So 51 years ago.
Wow.
But there was only millions of dollars of venture capital in the 70s. There wasn't $1 billion of venture capital until the 80s. And there wasn't billions and billions of dollars until the 90s, right before the dot-com boom. The dot-com boom came in the same moment that venture capital became an important financial industry. So it's not age old. It was not going on at the time of the Renaissance. There was no venture capital in the Renaissance. There was no venture capital when the United States was born. There was things kind of like venture capital in a totally different style when the railroads were built out. There was money, there were capitalists, but they didn't form venture capital funds. The form that it takes right now was basically invented in the 70s. And so here we are, 40 years after that, 50 years after that, and we are forming a new industry. And it has a lot of different names, and let's just call it the industry tackling the Sustainable Development Goals, because everybody knows in the industry, everyone knows what those are now.
Yeah.
You can call that sustainability if you want, but I call it mission-driven for profits. We're creating this new industry. I've been part of 7 years of this creation, but it's this creation has not been going on more than 25 years, 30 years. We're not yet to the equivalent point that the VC investors were in the 80s, the tech investors in the 80s. We're not there yet. We're not moving billions of dollars into mission-driven for-profit, early-stage mission-driven for-profits yet. We will in the 2020s. So when you say, well, it happened fast enough, don't know. But when it hits, when we hit the inflection point of growth, and we go from dabbling with millions of dollars to billions of dollars, you get this exponential curve, and all of a sudden it'll be a big thing. It'll be in the news. People will be talking about it, and they'll be talking about these ancient companies that were incorporated in the 2010s, right? Or ancient companies incorporated in the 2000s, and they'll still be talking about Ben and Jerry's and Stonyfield Farms and whatnot, that are like the pioneers that took all the arrows. But that will come at some point. We just have to continue doing what we're doing and prove out that people can make money. And then there are trillions of dollars to wash in and make that money.
And what do you think could help like this momentum? So let's say first thing we said is like they start cashing out, okay?
Yeah.
And like marketing, that there needs to be more story. There needs to be more reflective
So
on the
it,
successful.
the way I'm hearing what I'm saying, and I'm sounding like a total capitalist here. The constraint that's holding back the growth of this industry is capital. So, for example, we'll go back to my accelerator here for a second. We're sitting right now on something like 420 applications from probably 60 different countries of entrepreneurs who have ideas that can fix the world, who all need help, who all need money to get going. Right? So you probably of the 420, 410 need money and 10 have enough to get off the ground. That's the typical ratio we're talking about. We only have enough capital to help 7 of them. And when I say help, we have enough capital to give them each $20,000 and 2 months of help to make sure that to help them succeed. We don't have $20 million to then get them off the ground and up and running and big. And that money exists out there in the world. It's just hard to find. It's spread out. So when we're at a stage where we can help 100 out of 400, and when I say help, like help with all their capital needs as an industry, not as a single fund, well, then it'll take off.
Okay.
Right? So we're just constrained at the moment.
400 to 7, so that's like really lot.
We do 7 at a time. Some of my partners do 8, but we do a handful at a time. You give it 7 years and we've helped 83. Right. Well, we've helped a few hundred, but we've invested in 83. And you give us another 7 years and we'll have done 400.
Yeah. No, that's a great model, like really great model. And it's so, for the people who are actually worthy of the cause, it's probably the only model because they don't want to sell out and they don't want to feel pressured into doing so. So yeah, it's really brilliant. It's unique. I've never heard of it before. This is the first.
It's not unique. I did not invent it. I found, actually, talking about tech again, I found the debt version of this here in Seattle. There's a company called Lighter Capital. They do revenue-based loans to tech companies, tech companies that have no venture capital investment. There's a group down in Mexico City called Adobe Capital that does growth capital for Latin American mission-driven companies. They also use the debt form. In terms of revenue-based equity, I don't know another fund that uses that. But I didn't invent that. Somebody taught me how to do that.
That's cool. That's really cool. So what's your prognosis, if you can say, because this is like a talk for the future. So let's say in your prognosis for the next 5, 10, and then 50 years.
50 is too far out. Probably 50 is easier.
Because it's so relevant for the SDGs.
Yeah, so time. I can't tell you how fast things are going to move in 5 years. We will make progress. We will see some new. So I gave you 2 examples of some big ideas. There will be 10 or 20 more ideas of that scale that pop up somewhere in the world that get funded, that make the world noticeably better. But even then, right? It'll take 5 years until 10% of the population even knows what recycled clothing is. I don't think that'll be a mainstream product in 5 years. 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, I think all Levi's jeans will be recycled.
Like for the recycled clothing, actually, like there is this big, like one of the biggest companies in Europe, H&M, and they have a whole brand that's called Conscious that is solely recycled clothing. So I think that is
but the difference is those are like soda bottles that have been recycled into clothing versus clothing that's been recycled into clothing.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, there you can give your clothes to be recycled, but I don't know if they're using those clothes to make your new.
No. No one else is doing this yet.
That's awesome.
but we'll see breakthroughs in other areas as well as clear trend that's way bigger scale than I'm dealing with is renewable energy.
Yeah.
So within the next, we have the first country, 2 countries now running on solely renewable energy for electricity, right? Iceland and Costa Rica. We will see in the next 5-10 years the first countries running on renewable energy, period, including transportation. Probably Iceland will be first. But we should see states like California or Washington State, where I am, also following that trend in the next, 10, 15 years. We have, we're already at like 60-40 here in Washington, thanks to water power. It could be BC, Canada, which is something like 80 or 90% water powered. If we can just get some energy storage, that would be the big breakthrough, right? Affordable energy storage. But I can't tell you whether that's going to be 5 years or 7 years or 10 or 15 or 20. That those are not predictable numbers. So I don't know how far out. Yeah, when you said climate change, I don't know how we may pass the tipping point, and then hopefully the renewable energy will be so plentiful that at night when the wind is blowing, we'll just suck some CO2 out of the air, or the extra bright days when there's extra solar lying around, we'll just suck some CO2 out of the air, and hopefully they won't overshoot the other direction.
Okay, that's
as an optimistic techie, that's my expectation on how we'll fix the problem. Is we'll simply literally power through it with some excess power.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Luni, so much for this talk, and we truly wish everything the best for Fledge and your companies, and
thank you.
Success all over the world. Like really, try to come to Austria. I don't know.
Someday, and I'll give you the links. But the for those of you who don't want to read, the accelerator is fledge.co, and my writings, my books, and my blog and my podcast are at lunarmobiscuit.com, or just ask Google for Luni, it'll find me.
Okay, and everything will be down below, so you can find all the links. Thank you once again, and have a great day. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.